One of the things I really love about Umamusume, the various anime series in particular, is just how real the stories being told are. This is of course accomplished on several levels, the most obvious being that the stories are based off of the real lives and careers of the horses the characters bear the names of. So we are really not getting a purely fictional story, but an adaptation of something real, as I talked about in a previous video. But something else that makes these stories hit hard is, well, how relatable they are to both fans of sports in general and people who are athletes, even amateur ones like myself. Many of the challenges that the horse girl athletes in Umamusume face are the same things real-life human athletes have to deal with during their careers. Of course, the real horses faced much of that too, but giving it a human, or a mostly human, face makes it hit much harder and makes it much more relatable. So in this series of undetermined length, I will talk a bit about some of the sports-related themes and struggles seen in the various Umamusume anime shows and films, and parallel the character there with a real-life human athlete. Most likely in a sport that I'm personally familiar with, so Ninja Warrior or baseball, who face a similar challenge or struggle, and who, in some cases, almost eerily parallels the Uma in question. To illustrate the point that these sports struggles, sports stories, are an experience shared over both the real horses and horse girls, as well as real-life human athletes. So we start strong today with one of those, as I take a look at one of the themes, for lack of a better term, from Umamusume Cinderella Grey. One that's arguably somewhat minor in the grand scheme of things, but is still a major part of Oguri Cap's backstory. That being, overcoming this ability to become a star. And, as you probably saw from the thumbnail, I've got the perfect human parallel for her, as I introduce to you, almost literally, the Oguri Cap of American Ninja Warrior, Vance Walker. As is my way, here I'll drop a quick spoiler warning for some content from Umamusume Cinderella Grey. It's really an amazing show and you should watch it blind. Though, as I've also mentioned before about the franchise, spoiling yourself on the IRL events that are adapted in the show really doesn't detract all that much, if at all, from the enjoyment, because it's all just so well done. But I always like giving people the option. That taken care of, off to the races. While all people are born equal under the law, we aren't all literally born equal, obviously. We all have different quirks, innate talents, issues, and physical capabilities. But we are also not defined by those, so some of those random stats or conditions we're born with, or acquire throughout our lives, can obviously cause issues at times, and we have to overcome them. Such was with Oguri Cap, both the real horse and the Umamusume. Specifically, that primary challenge was being born with very weak legs. In real life, a congenital defect in his right leg, to the point where it was far from a sure thing that both the horse and horse girl would be able to properly walk, let alone run, and to say nothing about competing at an elite level of racing. Additionally, the real Oguri Cap suffered from chronic bone spavin, osteoarthritis of the hock, and ligament stress due to his leg structure throughout his career, which, along with a busy travel schedule for races, caused discomfort. But thanks to diligent care from those close to Oguri, his caretaker and trainer in real life, and her mom in the anime, the odds were defied, the ongoing issues managed, and the stage was set for a legendary racing career. A story which, in both real life and in Umamusume, sets up a perfect sports story that would feel too unlikely to be true if the real horse's story wasn't there for us to read. But that's adapting a horse's story, and horses and horse racing are very different in terms of mechanics and capabilities from human sports in real life, right? Well, perhaps not so different as you might think. Vance Walker was born with, and still contends with, a condition known as cerebral palsy, a type of non-progressive, permanent neurological disorder that appears in infancy or early childhood, and which affects muscle tone, posture, and movement. And when he was young, his parents were told, you guessed it, that he might never be able to walk. And competing in sports at an elite level was certainly seen as out of the question. He had to wear braces on his legs as a kid in order to help him start walking at all, and even to this day, it's a condition he has to manage. But with diligent care from his family, and his own very hard work put into it, he not only managed to walk, but decided to start training for Ninja Warrior, and eventually began to compete in Ninja Warrior Jr., a spin-off of the main show for younger competitors, where, in another fitting parallel to our resident hungry Umamusume, the format was primarily, if not entirely, racing, as opposed to the main American Ninja Warrior show, where it was more just athlete versus the course. And there, he tore it up. In the 2 seasons where he competed on Ninja Warrior Jr., Vance never fell on an obstacle, and never lost a single race, so he took home the top prize both times. However, sports careers are rarely a straight rise to the top. In Oguri's case, the lateness of both the real horses and the Umamusumes transferred to the top level of national racing led to not being able to race in the classic G1s at first, despite clearly having the ability to compete, and so had to wait until the 1988 Fall Tenno show. In Vance Walker's case, he was invited to season 12 of the main Ninja Warrior show, which was to be the first year in which competitors as young as 15 were allowed to compete there. But due to a certain virus going around, the show's format was modified for that year, and he had to wait one more year before getting his chance in the big show. But as we also saw with Oguri's journey, dominating at lower levels of competition doesn't mean you'll hit the ground running quite the same way when you get to the highest level. Oguri, of course, both in real life and in Cinderella Grey, lost the Autumn Tenno show and the Japan Cup, her first 2 attempts at G1 races, though in both she came tantalizingly close to winning. In Vance Walker's first season of American Ninja Warrior, things didn't go perfectly. While he certainly did very well for himself, scaling the Mega Wall, winning a safety pass race, and making it to Stage 3 of the finals, he did have a fall on Stage 2, and ultimately failed on Stage 3, ending his season just shy of the final goal. His second season on the big show was even tougher for him, as he shockingly had falls in both the qualifying and semifinals round, though he placed well enough to move on. But a fall on Stage 1 of the national finals, on an obstacle he had beaten before, ended that season for him on an even more frustrating note than the last. But like any great athlete in both real life and in fiction, he didn't get demoralized, and kept on training, determined to make the third time the charm. And boy did he follow through on that. In the next season, he had a near-perfect run up to the grand final, only marred by a single race loss in Stage 2 of the finals, but he still made it to Stage 3. And then finally the rope climb in the quest for total victory. And, in a season where a record 8 competitors attempted the climb, he came out on top, becoming just the third person in American Ninja Warrior history to do so, and the youngest winner by quite a bit. Shifting back to Oguri, winning the 1988 Arimakinen, the climax of the racing season, similarly put her on top of the world, and there would of course be more G1 victories to come. Beyond this point, it's tough to make more of a direct comparison, as Vance Walker's career in Ninja Warrior is far, far from over. Though like with too many elite athletes, he's missed one season and will probably miss another this year due to an injury that required surgery. And it's also hard to compare a full career of a human athlete, who will likely be in the game for many more years, if not even decades in the case of Ninja Warrior, to the real Oguri Cap, whose racing career only lasted between 3 and 4 years or so, as is the norm for thoroughbred racehorses. And of course the Umamusume Oguri's career follows a similar trajectory. But there are a couple of things still worth briefly touching on. Both the Umamusume Oguri and Vance Walker aren't super adept socially, as we see multiple times in the anime, and with Vance during his appearance on Season 2 of Beast Games. Though it's not an entirely fair comparison, as Oguri has all the anime girl charm, and all of her interactions are with people who are involved in her own sport. By all accounts, Vance gets on well with his fellow ninjas, and even though he wound up getting voted out of Beast Games by people he failed to make a good connection with, he still got decently far. Also, back to the relevant sports, Oguri understandably became one of, if not the best horse and Umamusume of her era. Certainly from a popularity perspective at least. And as for Mr. Walker, in Season 16 of American Ninja Warrior, he went on to win it all again, becoming both the first ever 2-time winner of the show, and of course the first ever back-to-back winner. So I think we can expect even more great things from him. Both of these incredible athletes overcame a potentially crippling childhood disability, as well as some struggles at the highest level of their sport of choice, to become not just excellent athletes, but among the best in their chosen sports, and arguably the best of their eras. It's just one example of several of how the Umamusume franchise isn't just a celebration of the careers of these racehorses we have all come to love, but a celebration of the athletic spirit in general, and an acknowledgement of the struggles athletes can face, as well as the great heights, peaks if you will, that they can achieve, telling stories that resonate with a wide range of people. And this is also why I maintain that sports fans who aren't particularly big anime fans should give Umamusume a shot, and that Umamusume fans who aren't particularly into IRL human sports should maybe check some out. There really is a lot of overlap, and people on either side of that fence may find something they enjoy over on that other side. Though I'd still recommend avoiding betting more than maybe a tiny bit. So what do you guys think? Are there any fellow fans of both sports, any sport, and Umamusume out there who also have seen parallels between one or more Umamusume characters and IRL human athletes? As I briefly mentioned earlier, the only 2 sports I really follow are Major League Baseball and American Ninja Warrior, the latter being the only sport I personally partake in.
So it's very possible there are athletes in other sports I don't know about, with some parallels worth discussing. But more importantly, let me know if you also found that some of the stories we saw with the horse girls in Umamusume hit harder for you because you felt a connection between the stories of these horses, both anime and real, and either a human sport and or athlete you follow, or even one you partake in yourself. I look forward to hearing what you have to say down below. If you enjoyed this video and like to support me in what I do here, my books and light novels are all available on Amazon. And you can get early access to videos, sneak peeks, and updates on my upcoming manga and other projects by subscribing over on Patreon. I also offer channel memberships which get you access to monthly members-only watch-along streams. And as always, if you have any thoughts on this video or just anything Umamusume related you'd like me to talk about, definitely share them in the comments section below. I'd love to hear them, and while I might not get to respond to every comment, at least not in a timely manner, I can guarantee that I read each of them. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any future uploads. That's all for now, so until next time.